All right, we have a couple questions from the audience. I'm going to put them to you guys, and then whoever feels inspired, just jump on in. So one question that a couple people asked was, which leader or manager do you learn from or model from in your work?
Which what, sorry?
A leader or manager, so I guess someone who's kind of like a mentor for you.
Is it really bad that none of us is thinking it?
Well, I'll say one thing. So, from a teaching point of view, if you haven't read the work of Parker Palmer, he's really amazing. And he taught me something incredible which had never occurred to me, which was that what he says is that in order to be an effective teacher, I guess this is a little self-centered, I'm sorry, it's not much interest to you, since normally you sit on the other side of this. But I guess I think quite a lot, as many of us do, about how to be a good teacher. And what he says is that to be a good teacher, you have to really expose your inner life to your students, and you have to be honest about your inner life. And that if you think your role is to sort of stand on a stage and be, and do a great performance, then, it will work for a while, but it will eventually fall apart. And that you won't really make real progress. And I think that's quite profound.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm definitely still looking.
I think that at least what I can say is that I learned which ones were not to be the ones that I like to be with. And so I learned to be very critical about that. So I think looking and seeing how you relate to those people who are supposedly your mentors is a very important thing. And it's like in the negative side of that.
So with a particular eye towards students, one of the most important things as you sort of progress in an academic setting is sort of impedance matching with your mentor, finding a mentor that you can work with. And there's a canonical failure mode, which is looking for the people who are famous or the people who are, important in some, technical sense, and thinking that those are the people to go to. And sometimes they are. But wildly undervalued is looking for the people that support a group and a culture around themselves that's psychologically constructive. Find the people to take on as a mentor who are good to the people around them and help them, right? In physics, there's a classic example of this. A guy named Sidney Coleman, arguably one of the most brilliant theoretical physicists to ever live. There are these wonderful videos you can check out from his course on quantum field theory at the Harvard Physics Library from like 1976. And they're this fisheye lens, and it's black and white, and he's got chalk in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and you can never tell which one he's going to put to the chalkboard. And it's totally spectacular. And he's famous not because he got the Nobel Prize or anything like that. He doesn't even have his name on nearly as many things as you'd think, given his sort of intellectual firepower. But what he did is he made students, and they did beautiful work, and they loved each other. He made a group that survived for decades by being good to the people around him. Find the mentors who will be good to you, not just brilliant, because brilliant is cheap and good is special.
That makes me think of the real world example of don't date someone who's mean to waiters. I think it's look for kindness in all parts of your life. Next question for you guys. How do you keep from over-interpreting your failures when you're learning something totally new?
I try to go back to learning foreign languages. And so I lived in Iceland for a year, and Icelandic is very, very different from English. And I'm used to having a big vocabulary. It's one of the things one has as an English professor. One thinks, not when one moves to Iceland and doesn't know Icelandic very well. And so in order to learn a foreign language, you just have to be completely shameless about sounding stupid. And so I was, and I learned Icelandic a lot better than everybody else who was worried about making mistakes. So I think kind of tapping into that shamelessness is pretty powerful. Just, you know, I had my 5,000 word box. If I couldn't talk about it with words from my 5,000 words box, I didn't talk about it. Or I just used the word red when what I really meant was crimson, and it made me sad, but, you know, I got over it.
Tack för er.
She just said thank you in Icelandic, and I did not expect that. Verðið þér að góðu. You know, it's occurring to me that I'm really lucky that I didn't just make that up, because that would have been a failure if I did not know what tack fyrir meant.
I feel like my night just peaked. That was great. Does anyone else have a response to this question?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, that's a very difficult question. So I'll give an example. I have trouble believing that there is a differential equation that I cannot solve. But there are. Most of them I can't solve, right? So basically, every time that I sit down to solve a differential equation, and after 2 or 3 days of struggle, I still can't solve it, I just can't believe it. So I'll go on forever until I realize after 2 months that I really can't solve it. And if I was any cleverer, I would only spend half an hour on it, right? Because you'd immediately realize that there's no way you're going to be able to solve that equation, right? So actually, being able to just come to, to face your own fate, right, and move on is really quite important, and might actually be the difference between being much more productive than I am or not at all, right? So, and I don't know the answer. I just struggle with it. It's just it's ridiculous.
So I want to go back to this question of why you would worry if you were learning something new that you were failing. And I think this is so MIT, this is so America, this is so everything that's wrong with us, right? Just think, you're learning some cool new ideas for the first time, right? And all you can think of is, am I learning them fast enough? Am I learning them as well as, the person next to me? Mellow out. I mean, this is a huge opportunity, right? And when you actually, master your little field and you know a few things, you kind of get jaded and think, how nice it would be to encounter all those things afresh. But you've lost that opportunity because once they've all sort of settled in, they're all old ideas, and old ideas aren't nearly so exciting. So I say you've got to enjoy the moment, right? And that's what you've really got to think about. If you don't enjoy learning new stuff, then you should really stop learning, because having learned it isn't really the important thing. It's the learning that's fun.
I just wanted to add that, yes, you have to also create some allies around you so you can actually talk to the people around you. And I remember I felt so idiotic the first time I was in the lab, and I was trying to do a Western blot, and my boss told me, this is like a cooking recipe. So, okay. So I go from A to B to C to D, and then no result. And oh my God, I'm mortified. And the guy is just asking me, where's the Western blot? And I said, well, there's nothing. And he looked at me like I'm totally stupid. He wants to kick me out of the lab. So I talked to some of my colleagues, so what's the circuit for a Western blot? And he said, what's your enzyme? What are you developing that? It's called alkaline phosphatase. Okay, good. So what's the pH that you're using for developing that? I never measured the pH. Okay, I measure the pH is 7. Alkaline phosphatase has to be 8, 9, 10. So, by creating, this conversation around you, suddenly my boss came and is like, here's the Western blot, the cooking recipe. So I felt like I learned a ton just by talking to people around. I didn't feel totally stupid and kind of went into my corner, continued to do the wrong thing. So that's, for me, that helps.
So, again, coming back to the be good to people, finding people to work with and to study with who respect and trust you and understand your ignorance, while also owning your ignorance and being upfront about it, is a magical thing, right? When you can walk into a room of people who, maybe kind of know this stuff, maybe know it better than you, and just be like, I don't know, but I really want to understand, people will help you. The flip side of that is, don't be that guy who's like, oh, you didn't know that? Because as a professor at MIT, the number of times I've seen someone be like, ooh, that's really interesting. How does that work? And then seen scorn come from a few feet away. And then all of a sudden the curiosity just twicks right out. Don't do that. Don't be that. When someone's really curious about something, they don't know something that you think is totally obvious, that is a gift you've been given where you get to teach it. That is an opportunity. Grab those things. Help people. Help each other.
We have one question that is for Daniel Jackson, and then I will open it up to everyone else as well. You said that you should focus on your excitement and impact of the project you're working on in order to motivate yourself. But when that fails, how do you keep going?
Well, in some sense, that's a good question. I mean, in some sense, you keep going because you're part of something bigger, right? That when you decide to engage in some big project, normally it's a big project that other people are engaged in too. And you have to somehow get to the point that you're getting real excitement by being part of that. And even if you aren't the person who ends up making the crucial discovery or the crucial advance, you have to somehow be able, to enjoy having been part of it. And if you can't enjoy the journey, and you can only enjoy the sense that you were, at the end, that you were the critical person who caused the success, then that's kind of a very difficult way to set yourself up. In short, you have to think that you're changing the world. And the truth is, if you're involved in an important project, you will do important things, right? Because there are always things to be done, right? Maybe you won't do the biggest thing, but you'll do something. And if you're doing something on an important project, it will turn out to be important because it will be part of something big.
I'm going to open that up to you guys if you'd like to add. Do you want me to refresh the question? So the question was, you said you should focus on your excitement and impact of the project you're working on in order to motivate yourself. But when that fails, how do you keep going?
I don't know about everybody else here, but the reason I'm here, the reason I do what I do is because I'm deeply passionate about the science. Everything else sort of comes with it, right? But the primary reason is that, I'm a physicist, I want to know how the world works. And so in that sort of mode, you are always discovering something, right? You're always learning something. I mean, you might not get the results you want, right? But you're constantly motivated because, hey, there's things you don't understand and you'd like to understand them, and that's why you joined the army, right? That's why you do it, right? So that's what does it for me, right? And again, going back to my recurring theme of going weeks and weeks trying to solve something, what keeps me going is that, I actually want to know the answer. And that's a very powerful motivator for me.
I don't think there's really an answer to this question, or like a good one. And I think the fact that there isn't is actually an important thing in an interesting way. So sometimes you just need to persevere, right? You just need to push. It's hard, Bahr, who's this famous aeronautical engineer, he designs airplanes that look not like airplanes, and he said, research is where you'd want to do something and 95% of people say, not going to work. 5% of the people say, maybe. And that's research. And I think that's true. And in that situation, if you're going to do something ambitious and dramatic, then dude, it's going to fail and you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But sometimes you actually don't like what you're doing. And that's okay. At some point, cut bait and run. Right? And I say this very much as someone who did that. I love physics. Anyone who's, seen me teach 804 knows there are a few things in the world I get more excited about than quantum mechanics. It's awesome. But at the end of the day, I stopped wanting to do it, and I started really wanting to do something else. And that's something that sometimes the right reaction is, man, look, you've got a lot invested. You're just getting distracted by the new shiny thing, so you got to focus. And sometimes the answer is, you're not happy. You need to think about that. And you gotta be honest with yourself. It's not easy to tell which of those is the right answer. It's not always clear that there is a right answer. But you have to have respect enough for yourself to admit the possibility that both of those could be the right answer. And it's up to you to figure out where that is. And your friends will help you. My wife helped me a lot. She's totally amazing. But find people who will help you see that, because it's really hard to see from the inside.
I have one, by the way. Not that I do what these people do, but a couple years ago, I was listening to a radio show with my husband, and they were, I think it was Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. and they were interviewing their special guest, and I can't remember who it was. But he said, like, how the reason he would get over failures, I think he was some kind of scriptwriter for TV, was he would just say, over and next. And my husband and I were, like, in the car, and we were like, that's great. We like that. Over and next. And that was maybe 4 years ago. And every time something goes wrong or we don't get something we want, and one of us is a bit sad in the face, the other one will just be like, over and next. And I can't tell you why, but it's just that tiny little coping mechanism that helps. And it helps me just sort of move on to the next thing. Does anyone else have anything they want to add with that last question? I feel like I jumped in there. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to reiterate what Allan said, because I think that's an incredibly profound observation. I think what you need to do when you think about your future, don't ask, who do I want to be? What accomplishments do I want to have? Ask, what do I want my day to look like? What do I want to be doing? You know, I once was talking to a PhD student who was an advisee of mine, meaning not in my research group, but, talking to me about their career each term. And they were telling me what a terrible time they were having, what a big struggle, and how they really wanted to get their PhD done because they really wanted to be a great researcher. And I said, well, tell me, how much have you been enjoying the research that you've been doing? And he said to me, oh, I hate it. And I said, did it ever occur to you that if you actually hate doing research, maybe you shouldn't be a researcher? And so I think we all have to ask ourselves exactly the question that Allan asked, which is, what have I actually done today or this week that I really enjoyed? Because that's what success will mean for me. It will mean setting the future for myself, setting my path so that I end up doing what I enjoy doing. And that's very different from deciding who you want to be.
Sage advice. Thank you. After you have a failure, like, how do you make a good inference of your next step? Is that right? Okay. Open to the panel.
You know, I'm going to actually make the difference because I'm the only woman around here. So I think that when something goes wrong, I get feedback. So I look for feedback around me. And if the feedback that I get is something that fits into my goals, what I have thought, that actually gets me to the next level. So I remember when I was, a fellow and at the hospital, and they told me, well, you will never be an assistant professor. And I said, okay. And so when, the promotion came back and they say, well, have you been looking for a job? And say, I actually have not. And they looked at me like I was stupid because I have not been looking for a job. So I stayed another 3 years, and then I was actually promoted for assistant professor. So then, because people around me thought that they gave me a very positive feedback of what I was doing. When I got promotion for associate professor, oh, no, you will never. At Harvard, woman, and it doesn't work. Okay, promotion comes, and the guys ask me, have you been looking for a job? And I say, well, actually, I like it here. And so, okay, she must not get the cue. And so when time came for a full professor, they told me, look, there is 17% women who are professors at Harvard, and 83% are men, so you can't be in that group. And I said, okay, well, I'll think about it. And I thought about it, and all the people around me just gave me this positive impact that this could actually be done. So I think you have to listen to what's around. It could maybe not be possible. And last year, they made me a full professor. So I thought that, what I received was a tremendously good impact from people who were giving me, a lot of feedback. And so I think you just listen. You don't go against it. And like you were saying, if you don't feel like you're enjoying, I tremendously enjoy what I'm doing. So if I didn't enjoy it, I would not have done it.